Let me know when we can get started because I can't hear you all that
So
well.
we're on.
Okay, good morning. We'll go ahead and call the meeting to order at 8:11 and we'll start with roll call. Trustee Grist,
Present.
Trustee Martinez,
Here.
Trustee Toasty,
Here.
Trustee Marks, and Trustee here. Is there anyone that could lead us in the flag salute?
I can do that. Ready, begin.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
And to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Is there any public comment at this time for open session? Do we have the phone available as well?
We have public comment in person.
Oh,
So we are working on getting in person. There's no cards? There's the green basket. Yeah. Sorry, guys. Yeah, I apologize about that. Then we can have them start. We can have them start and then fill it out.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
Would you like to go?
So we can have you start and then have you fill out the card afterward, if that's all right?
Yeah.
So if you'll come to the podium and just state your name, and then you'll have 3 minutes for your comment.
Make sure that you talk right into the microphone and loud. It's on.
Yep.
Good morning, Board of Trustees.
Can you state your name?
My name is Gabriel Villagomez.
Go ahead.
One of the groundskeepers here at the Cultural School District.
Okay.
Good morning, Board of Trustees. We are writing this letter in regards to the 2 groundskeeper positions being laid off, Alfred Regalado and myself, Gabriel Villagomez. We have reached out to our supervisor, our director, and our union in hopes that we would be considered to be rescinded. Our best hope now is to reach out to the Board of Trustees for this consideration. In looking for ways to advocate for ourselves, we have come across a few findings that we felt should be mentioned. The 2 groundskeeping positions became available in September 2020. It is our understanding that the positions were added as a result of the construction of our new school, Rancho Santana, which increased the workload of the existing grounds crew. Hedges, sprinklers upkeep, field maintenance, landscaping, pest control, gophers, etc., etc. Prevention of safety hazards for our students and staff were taken into consideration when opening up 2 additional positions. We are essential workers. Oh my God, I lost one, please. We are essential workers that work during the COVID pandemic. We stepped it up with the renovation of 4 fields in less than 6 months. We received outstanding recognition from the board, district/school staff, and we've even been stopped by community members to thank us. Currently, we service 12 sites district-wide. We're sharing time, me and my coworker.
Thank you.
Hello, hi.
Thank you.
Hello, hi. I'm Alfred Regalado. I'm a groundskeeper. I'm in the same boat as Gabriel. Our crew members are knowledgeable in mechanical repairs for our equipment. Therefore, when any equipment is not working properly, our crew is able to fix the issue, while others continue with the daily maintenance of schools instead of having to take the equipment to a shop where it can be kept for an uncertain time, resulting in delayed work. This is a huge savings to the district, as we are not outsourcing to other agencies and keeping the cost in-house. An example of these savings are field renovations and tree maintenance. This is shown in our maintenance department records. In addition, our understanding is that Hollister School District currently has an agreement with the City of Hollister, master agreement for use of recreational fields that was approved on November 28th, 2017. That provides an annual contribution of $300,000. This agreement states that the district is responsible for off-field routine maintenance of these facilities. It will increase this year to $315,000. In July, in our maintenance of our facilities, it will increase, In our findings, we have come to conclusion that there is money to fund our positions. We are including a copy of the agenda item with the city agreement for you to review. Our district students, staff, and community deserve the safest facility conditions. Our crew has worked hard to maintain the beautification of our campuses. This helps with not only the welcoming to our students, but also our administrators, teachers, staff, and community. Please reconsider resigning our positions, as we do take pride in our work and enjoy what we do. If you would like to have a conversation regarding our letter or have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact myself or Gabriel. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you.
I just want to add, I just sent an email to all board of trustees and our superintendent.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I wish I could see them, but I can't.
See what?
Is there any more public comment?
Any other public comment?
Trustee Martins?
No,
Thank you.
no, there's nobody
Okay.
else.
Moving on to discussion action item, there's a presentation by Fiscal Crisis Management Assistant Team. Superintendent Sanchez, are
Yes.
they on?
Item 6A, we will have presenter Mike Fine from PICMAT, and there he is. So welcome, Mr. Fine, to the special board meeting for the Hollister School District. You're on screen.
Thank you, Superintendent. Good morning to
Raise the volume.
thank you for the invitation to be here. You've asked me to come and outline the process around oversight of school districts, predominantly by county superintendent, with respect to fiscal distress. And I had the opportunity to meet with your superintendent and see, and that I think is what led to a desire to have me speak to the rest of you. I'm only going to speak for a few minutes and just really focus in on process and why process is so important. I'm not going to speak directly to any collective bargaining issues and so on, but I will speak to your fiscal stabilization plan and the elements of that plan that you are considering in this special meeting today. So first and foremost, I think you all understand this as a locally elected governing board. You are ultimately responsible for the school district. You have a fiduciary responsibility for the well-being of the school district, and that includes its fiscal condition, its financial status. The term trustee is derived from the concept here of fiduciary. And a fiduciary is somebody that acts in the best interest of the organization or the party that they are the fiduciary for. And so that is your primary duty. And I want to recognize that, and I want to applaud you, because I think to date you have taken that very serious. As you've experienced some fiscal distress and some challenges with respect to finances, you've taken action to address those in a way that you believed was reasonable. And yeah, you can slice and dice, the cake and the pie lots of different ways, but ultimately you as a group make a decision on how you do that with respect to your current conditions. And so I applaud the decisions that you made today, the adoption of the fiscal stabilization plan that you have, and I want to implore you to stick to it, stick to that plan you've adopted. There may come a time that you adjust that plan, but today is not that time. So let's talk about the process. Again, first and foremost, you have the fiduciary duty to make these decisions for your school district. Your county superintendent has an oversight role. They are, in some respects, your backstop, but they are not ultimately responsible for running your school district unless things go terribly wrong, and that's not the path you're on. You're on a good path. You're not on a bad path. The county superintendent's role in oversight, you're very familiar with the kind of beginning pieces of that role, or the normal, if I could use that term, pieces of that role. And that is that they review your budget when you adopt it, and they send you a letter and talk about any concerns they have and point different metrics out to you and trends out to you. They do the same thing with your interim reports, and they either concur or don't concur with your self-certification of positive, qualified, and or negative, if that were to come about. So you see that on a regular basis, on an annual basis, as you work through your annual cycle, dealing with your budget and your financial reporting. The county interacts with you. And behind the scenes, and I know you know this, the county staff is interacting with your staff on a regular basis to understand things so that they can reach the proper conclusions as well. But when things get a little dicey and you begin to experience some distress, then the county is going to do the same thing that we do with kids in the classroom. And that is they're going to provide almost a multi-tier system of support for you as a district, just like our teachers in our schools do for kids. And what that looks like is the same thing we do with kids. It's a perfect analogy. And that is they're going to provide intervention that is tied directly to the need. It doesn't need to be less than what the need is. It shouldn't be more than what the need is. It should just be matched to exactly what the need is. And to date, that has been to have dialogue with the staff and with each of you to require that you adopt a fiscal stabilization plan, to review that fiscal stabilization plan, and so on. They have other choices available to them in statute. And they have a system of progressive intervention, just like we use with a student. If the student is not ultimately acquiring the knowledge we expect them to have and the time we expect them to have it, and so on, then we ramp that intervention up, right? That will be the exact same environment that the county will operate in their relationship with you. They'll ramp that up. And an example of ramping that up would be to appoint a third party to assist the district in moving through its process. The lowest level of intervention is a fiscal expert, that can ramp up to a fiscal advisor. It ultimately can ramp up to a fiscal advisor with stay and rescind authority over the board, meaning that this fiscal advisor can either stay or rescind any action that the board may take. It doesn't act on behalf of the board, but it can stop an action that the board takes that is counter to your fiscal stability and to your fiscal solvency. And that, of course, is not where you're at. And the work that you've done to date will keep you from getting there. But key to that is to stay true to that work and to the plan that you've adopted. Ultimately, the intervention by the county is designed to turn the district around, get it back on solid footing, and for you to move forward in serving your students and your community in the way that you, that is incumbent upon you as a school district and as trustees. There are other interventions available should you not turn the corner. And I'm not going to spend time today going into those because you're not close to that point. Now, that can change quickly overnight. In some years, the state budget deteriorates between January and June. And so things like that can deteriorate, or your fiscal condition can actually deteriorate. In other cases, things can actually improve. And in fact, the governor, within about an hour and a half, will announce his update to his budget proposals. And generally speaking, things will improve for school districts. It is too early, though, for you to quantify those improvements. That's the governor's view. Still has to work things out with the Assembly and with the Senate, both of which have different proposals. And that will go on for, that discussion will go on for another month plus before we get to a final state budget on July 1. But even with what you'll hear today as good news from Sacramento with respect to state finances, you have to understand that you need to take these things in sequential order, and you need to move in a process that makes sense. You're faced with action today because of a statutory deadline of the 15th, which is over the weekend. So Monday basically is the deadline. Unfortunately, between today's announcements from Sacramento and Monday, you're not going to know much more than what you already know before you hear those announcements. They will all be, and I'll be the first to admit, they will all be positive announcements, and they will ultimately have some positive impact on you, but you're not in a position to be able to quantify that right now, number one. And number two is you don't know what the final enacted budget will look like. The legislature does get to weigh in on the governor's budget, and ultimately is required to pass it. So there'll be a lot of negotiations. Will more money be put into transportation versus be put into the local control funding formula? Will more money be put into only certain schools in school districts as opposed to all schools? Those kinds of negotiations still need to take place. I've heard some from your community talk about that the environment that you're in is somewhat manufactured, a manufactured crisis. In fact, I don't view it that way at all. And in fact, one of the roles that the county superintendent has is to sort things out, to sort fiction from nonfiction out. That is one of their roles. And as they review your budgets, they review your interims, as they agree with you or disagree with you on the interpretation of the data and on how things are booked and accounted for and so on, one of their roles is to sort out, again, fact from fiction. So I don't see, given their level of involvement to date, I think you can be fairly assured that this is not something that's manufactured. You've got a number of considerations in your district. Listen, there are 1,100 and some school districts and another 1,200 and some charters in the state of California. Each of you are a little unique. We all do the same work, right? We all do the exact same work in communities across the state, but we're all a little unique, right? Each district has its own personality. Each district has its own set of facts and figures. Each district has its own set of risks, and each district has its own tolerance for risk. And where you find yourself right now is with minimum reserves with a number of risk factors. And that's what you've been dealing with as those play out. And those look different in some cases than your neighbors. They look different than a district your same size that you would consider in your peer group on the other side of the state, or in Southern California, or farther in Northern California, right? And so you have to look at your unique set of circumstances. And included in that is where you stand with the use of your one-time funds that came as a result of the pandemic. What's the spend rate related to those? What's your exit plan to get out from those services once those funds are exhausted? They will be exhausted relatively soon. And so how are you going to deal with the folks you've hired with those funds, the services you've added as a result of those funds? You have enrollment challenges, and actually you're not unique in this regard. Most school districts across the state have enrollment challenges right now, both enrollment and attendance challenges, actually. You also have inflationary cost pressures, and each district's going to feel that a little different. But we're at record inflation acceleration levels right now. We're not at record inflation levels, but how quick it's moving on us is difficult to quantify right now. What that looks like 2 months from now, no less over the course of the whole next fiscal year. You also have some uniqueness in the percentage of your budget devoted to people. Let me be the first to say, this is a people business we're in, and we use people to accomplish our mission with kids, right? It's really, in some respects, as simple as that. However, there's a balance there of how much of your budget you spend on people versus non-people. And part of that gets back to risk again, and how you deal with risk. You've been running above 90%. You've been running approximately 93% of your budget spent on people. With some of the fiscal stabilization plan elements you've adopted to date, that brings that number back down into the 90% range, which is a little safer spot for you to be. The average across the state is around 85%, some approaching 90%. Once you cross the 90% threshold, though, your risks increase dramatically. And the best way I can illustrate that for you is to actually think about this in verse. Don't think about 90%, but think about the 10% that's left. If you spend 90% on people, then that leaves you 10% for everything else. Well, in your case, what is everything else? Well, like every school district, you have utilities, you have electric, you have natural gas, you have propane, you have water, potable water, you have wastewater, you have telephone and internet, and all those things that fit under the utility. That is the single largest piece of that remaining 10 cents of every dollar that you have to spend. The next item is non-public school, non-public agencies. And most of you, I think it would be safe to say, you would describe that as a cost you can't control. Now, I happen to believe you can control that cost, but only to a certain degree. But these are services for kids that you can't otherwise provide in-house in your district for your most needy kids in special education. These include therapists, these include services at a non-public school, and so on. That has to come out of that 10%, that 10 cents on the dollar as well. And the final large item that comes out of that 10 cents is transportation. In your case, you contract out for transportation, as do most districts in the state. And that becomes a cost over in your 5,000 object codes, a non-people object code. And that is also a significant cost. Yes, you can control that cost to a certain extent, but you don't have complete control over it. Fuel rates alone, gasoline and diesel rates alone, heavily influence that. When you take those three things into consideration, your 10 cents that you have left now to spend on everything else just got down to a couple pennies. And within that couple pennies is technology, is supplies, is everything else you know as a school district you purchase and services you provide. And so it's important to recognize that there is an appropriate balance there. And at the same time, I want to be very respectful of decisions that have been made in the past that get you into that 90%. I, my wife's taught elementary school in a California school district. This is her 38th year. Our son is a high school English teacher. We are, as a family, completely committed to the education process in the state, in our public school system. So I fully appreciate what people bring to our work, right? What we bring to our work, because we're all on the people side of the equation. But again, I strongly ask you to look at that balance and understand that that balance is a risk factor for you, okay? Does it mean it has to be changed? Not necessarily, but it is a risk factor, and it limits your ability to make budget adjustments that don't impact people. If you were at the 85% range, you would be able to make a whole bunch of budget adjustments that don't impact people. The reality is at 93%, almost anything you look at to make a budget adjustment to deal with fiscal distress and concerns is going to then have an impact on your staff. You also have to look at the balance between your unrestricted and your restricted, and how you use those. So much, it's the similar balance that between recurring money and one-time money. And your mix, while it may look like some of your peers, is unique to Hollister, okay? It's unique to the set of circumstances and the decisions and the plans you put in place as a board on how you're going to spend those restricted dollars, whether they were pandemic related in their one time or they're ongoing in their Title I dollars to serve your schools. So keep all that in mind, and keep in mind what dollars ultimately sustain your core programs. And those are the dollars that you have to protect. Those are the dollars that you have to constantly balance, because that's what ultimately your obligations are, right? Is to serve our kids each day in their core classrooms. I mentioned already today is the May revised here in another hour. Before that, I'll actually be on the phone as part of briefings. There will be good news in the May revised. The ability, though, to quantify that good news, the ability to apply it to your district in the time that you have to make a final, to make this next decision. It's not the final decision, but the next decision in the sequence here as you work on budget development is, there just isn't enough time to do that. Remember, with respect to the May revised, you want to go in the right sequence. You want to go in sequence 1, 2, 3. You don't want to go in the opposite sequence of 3, 2, 1. You have lots of time after today, after next week, after the enacted budget in June. You'll have time to make adjustments and to potentially look at a different plan going forward. And I would encourage you to do that as you get to a final enacted state budget, have the ability to quantify that and understand what that means for Hollister itself. If you deviate from your fiscal stabilization plan, and I'll close with this, if you deviate from the plan you have already adopted, then the county office is going to take action in the next step of intervention. And that next step is not a letter. That next step, well, the next step will be described in a letter to you, but it will actually be to designate the district as in fiscal distress. We call that lack of going concern. It is a statute, 42-127.6 of the Ed Code. It will lay out some options. That statute does lay out some options for the county superintendent. The district will respond to those. You have the opportunity to appeal those. If your appeal is unsuccessful and you don't, again, make progress to turn the corner, then that same statute gives the county another set of options to consider to help bring you in line with a balanced budget. And so while the county superintendent is very capable of speaking for herself, I've had this conversation with her. And that is that the bottom line is if the district does not hold to its plan, that they will be forced to take action. You need to understand that's not always a choice the county superintendent desires to take. It's not always a choice that they want to take, certainly by any means, but they are really obligated to fulfill their statutory duty with respect to intervention, with respect to oversight in the district. The entire goal of this process, we call this the AB 1200 process after Assembly Bill 1200 from 30 years ago. That entire process, and let me pause there for a minute. It's 30 years old. This is a very mature process. It's a very well-known process. It's not something that's new. It's not something that's unique. That process is something that will play out in relatively short order. And that will ultimately result probably in a third party coming to engage with you as a district, depending on what level of intervention the county superintendent desires to impose. So with that, Madam President and Madam Trustee, I will stop and see if there's any questions before I need to leave you this morning.
Thank you for the presentation. Looks like Trustee Grist has a question.
Yes, I do. Thank you, Mr. Fine, for such a great presentation. It was easy to understand, and I respect everything you have to say. I do have a couple of questions, though. You talked about how today will be positive in regards to school financing, but we don't know where he's going to put the money. And we're under the gun because today we have to let our employees know. And so that gives us no time to evaluate. I'm saying this because I want to make sure I understand it, that we have no time to evaluate what the funds will do for us, the funds that he says he's going to release, but the legislature still has to approve. Am I right?
That's correct. The budget,
Okay.
the true budget negotiations between the governor and the legislature are still to come. And
Right.
those are typically three-way negotiations. The Senate has its view, the Assembly has their view, and the governor has their view, right?
Right.
I expect that the legislature, the two houses of legislature will come together with one view, and just as they did last year, and that will be then negotiated with the governor. While there's good news, there are some pretty serious complications in all of this that deal with the state appropriations limit and some other factors. And you saw part of the governor's proposal released yesterday with
Right.
regard to relief on inflationary factors. He didn't speak about schools though yesterday.
No. My other concern though is that, you know, how you talk so much about how this is a people business, and what we're doing budgetarily affects our people.
Yep.
And so that's where it's really hard to do, because we're saying, geez, if we would have had the information earlier, or, closer, how this whole thing. And so we're affecting people on something that may dramatically change, but we're stuck by timelines that we have to let them go. Am I correct in that understanding?
You're correct, and those are statutory timelines. You have no control of
Right.
those timelines.
All right.
But understand that today's vote to take the next step forward is not a final decision in some respects. You always have other options that will come about 6 weeks from now after you see an enacted budget, 45-day revision point of the budget at different points in time. And I realize that that's not very comforting to somebody that's holding a pink slip. I fully appreciate and understand that. But that is the situation you're in.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. You've kind of cleared things up for me. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Are there other questions from other trustees? I do want to ask you a question in public, Mr. Fine, that I already asked you before, but I think it's an important one, because, I believe in transparency. These are public funds. And one of the concerns I've publicly stated is the cutting of some of our social emotional staff, you know, I mean, really everyone. I'm with Trustee Grist. The cutting of all of our staff is, it's, I don't, you know, I don't think it's something that we take very lightly, right? We take very serious. So, but in one of the scenarios that we've talked about is these funds that are coming down or grant monies specifically for social emotional needs. And so the question that I asked you before was, you know, can we bank on that and say, hopefully, you know, we get that money. It looks like it's going to happen. And then, you know, um, kind of hope for that. And I just want to make sure that we talk about that publicly because, you know, there is talk at the state level about these monies coming down. And there is already grant money available at different counties. So why couldn't we use that to save some of our staff, whoever it is, right? There's monies for different projects. So is that something that you would recommend? Is it, again, it's not part of the timeline? Maybe that's something you're talking about that comes later.
So I guess a couple thoughts on it, and let me separate the existing monies from potential new monies. If there are existing monies in programs out there that Hollister is eligible for, I think you would know that. Your staff would know that. And some of those monies may be entitlements, which means they flow to you automatically. And some of those monies may be more competitive grants or that you have to apply for. And so obviously your staff being in tune to that, whether that's a partner at the county, and I'm assuming that we're not talking about county office of ed, we're talking about county government, right? And so on. What you know, you can count on. But hope is not a plan. I have a colleague who's now passed away was in this business like me now over 30 years, and we were good friends. And he always used to say, "Hope is not a plan." So if you have an agreement, you have a grant application that's been approved, absolutely score that. And what I mean by score that is count it, right? Mm-hmm. The discussion in Sacramento about additional support for social and emotional learning, specifically in Proposition 98 for schools, and about the social and emotional support programs that are outside Proposition 98, such as through county governments. Those are all going to be part of the enacted state budget discussion. Whether they survive or they don't survive is a different piece of it. Now, there's no question that the federal pandemic money that you receive, both federal and state, can be used to support social and emotional learning for kids. But you've already adopted a plan with regard to that. And I assume you've staffed according to that plan. That was your ESSER plan. And that you've staffed according to that. Those monies do run out. They are one-time in nature. So you have to think about what the exit plan is according to that. And I don't personally know where you stand with that right now. If those funds are fully expended, you still have another good year of those funds or 2 years of those funds left. But your exit plan should correspond to that timing of what we call the spend rate. How soon are those funds going to be exhausted? So yeah, the good news is this. I think there's finally truly recognition that social and emotional learning and social and emotional supports for our kids is sometimes as important as the academic support that we provide. That's the good news. The second aspect of that, though, is how you tap into that. When are those funds available and so on? So when those are allocated to you, when you know with certainty that you can quantify what Hollister's share of those may be, that's the time to hire the staff to go with that, to go with those programs. Put that plan in place and move forward and hire to do that.
Okay,
but not
thank
before. Not hire based on some promise. That's not written down right in an agreement or in a grant process.
Okay, and then I have another question, and you kept reiterating the importance of not deviating from the plan that we already have in place from our second interim, right? And would you say, because otherwise, I mean, really our hands are tied because the county's going to be like, that's not the plan we approved.
That's correct.
So does that include even if we were to look at some positions, or is it let's say there were a few, and I guess it would depend on the money, I'm sure, but is it like a complete, you cannot deviate at all from the plan, or is it like, is there some wiggle room?
So I apologize, I lost the very first.
Oh. Is it my connection? Is it here? Oh,
Yeah,
okay,
I think it's actually mine. Every once
okay.
I get these messages across my screen that says I'm unstable. I think it's talking about my internet's is not stable. Although it could be greatly debated of whether that's a message that my wife is sending me. Or a colleague is sending me. But I think I understand. So let me take a stab at it, and if I missed it, I'll take another stab at your question. You adopted a fiscal stabilization plan that led to your second interim report filing. Your second interim report included the elements of that plan. That led you to a self-certification that the county has agreed with. If you deviate from that, you're going to force the county to relook at all of that. And what statute provides in 42-127.6 is that at any time during the year, the county superintendent can designate the district as a lack of going concern. So you know that you adopt a positive, qualified, or negative certification at your interim reports. This other statute provides for the county to do that at any time something has gone off course, okay? And that's what would be happening. There may come a time for you to revise your fiscal stabilization plan. That may be in early July after you have an enacted state budget. And I would do that very candidly as part of your 45-day revision that's also called for in statute. You have from 45 days from the time the state enacts their budget, you have that time to adjust your budget. So as part of that work, I would ask your superintendent and their staff to also adjust your fiscal stabilization plan in concert with advice from the county, and then be able to move forward, right away in July with potentially a different plan. Just because you adopt your budget in June, this doesn't mean you can't change it a day later, right? There are times in the year that you're forced to change it and update it, but you as a board have the authority to change your budget at any time. You just meet and make that decision. So if things do improve dramatically, you do not have to wait till September 15th or until first interim in December. Take the action as soon as you can quantify it and put everything together and analyze it. Then if that's justification to change, make the change and move forward so that when you start the school year, you are where you want to be.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Very helpful. Does anyone else have any questions, comments? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Fine.
You're welcome. Unless you ask different, I'm going to leave you so I can get to my 9 o'clock. All right.
Have a good day.
Guys, have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Moving on to item 6B, discussion and approval of the reduction or discontinuance of particular kinds of services. Superintendent Sanchez.
Okay, so moving on to item 6B, we have, as we've stated in January and then again in February and March and so on in the different presentations, we've come to the time where the board will consider a final approval of the layoffs that we've discussed on March 3rd and March 10th. In that process, we have a formal resolution that must be considered for adoption, and this is a statutory responsibility. It's something that is within Ed Code that we take action to consider the following information. So resolution 12/21/22 is in regards to the particular services for specific classified positions. And the resolution itself is lengthier than all of the ones that we've previously considered because it indicates all of the historical information that has led us up to the decision today. So we can review it individually, or if you'd like for me to go through each bullet, what would you like to do, Board President? Would you like for me to go through the entire resolution, or we'd like to?
No, I think, I mean, I want to ask my colleagues as well. I think that I don't think we should go through each bullet, but a summary, that you're giving
Okay.
is enough. And then if we can, ask questions.
Absolutely. Okay, so the front page of the resolution includes the different dates that we considered the resolutions, particularly March 3rd and 10th. It specifically names the resolution numbers, which was 4, 9, and 10. That included the consideration for elimination or reduction of the classified positions. And again, this, in regards to classified, is always in correlation to lack of funds or lack of work. As we've stated before, the district is taking the perspective that this is due to lack of funds, not necessarily lack of work. So with this process, staff notified on or before March 15th all of the impacted employees of the preliminary layoff notification. We had the ability for staff to consider participating in a layoff hearing. We did not have layoff hearings for classified employees. So that brings us to the date where we're at now in the present. We are looking at notifying staff should the board vote to approve this resolution by Sunday. So we will take action, staff will take action to notify the impacted staff today if the board votes to approve this resolution. This resolution also is different in that it names the specific employees, it names the FTEs, and it includes the statutes that correlate to the May deadline. Do you have any questions?
We have a question from Trustee Grist.
In this approval of this resolution, so, and the state comes back with its money, then does the board do a session where we reenact this resolution, or I don't say reenact, but to negate this resolution? I mean, how did the people get their jobs back?
Good question. Thank you for asking that. So employees that are impacted due to layoff have statutory rights to a reemployment list for the next 39 months. It does not require a board meeting or board action prior to the fact. What I would envision taking place is that after the steps that Mike Fine spoke about this morning, we would consult with the board if we knew that there was funding that secured the ability to fund ongoing salaries, and it would be, through discussions of the board and myself and staff to move forward with those decisions.
Does the HR department notify the people that, okay, I'm in Disneyland right now, okay, and I'm thinking everything's perfect, and the state has authorized us, and we have the funds to hire these people back. So then, does Linda call people up and say, hey, come on back? I mean, how does this work?
So there's guidance. There's several steps that need to take place. For staff that have bumped into a lower paying position, they've remained staff, just in a different position. If in the future we open up a position that staff are interested in what being considered for, particularly if it's not the same thing, not the same job title or necessarily the same job description, staff have something called Tucker rights, where they notify the district via applying for a job to be considered for employment in that new and different position that potentially is similar to the one that they held prior. So staff will be notified when positions are posted, and that's statutory. That's something that we do.
How are they notified?
So when staff are laid off, if they are exiting the district, they will have provided HR with a personal email where we distribute job postings. If they are within the system because they've bumped into a lower position, they are notified because they receive the posting via their email, the work email.
Because they're still working.
Yes, they remain employees of the district, just in a lower classification, potentially.
Trustee Grist, did you have a follow-up?
No, I'm good. My answer was, my question was answered.
Does anyone else have questions, comments? Trustee Martinez.
I think for me, it was very clear from the gentleman that spoke before, the role that the county has in our budget and the involvement. My question is that if we know we're going to get more money and it will increase in different areas, in different pockets, what will their involvement be in our decision making moving forward?
Very good question. Because we have the adopted fiscal stabilization plan, I would venture to say that we would need to work with the county, and I'm trying to recall precisely the words that Mike Fine said, somewhere along the lines in July, to readjust and readopt a new fiscal stabilization plan. I know that they will be looking most likely at our reserve level, because that was something that was indicated in the second interim letter that we received, I believe yesterday or on the 11th. And they will be looking at the percentage of funds allocated to salaries. The letter itself, I believe, states that we would need to receive approval from the County Office of Ed should we in the future move away or try to amend that plan.
Well, any changes, it says we have to notify them within 5 days.
And they will respond back.
Do they have a time limit that they respond back to us?
Within 5 days, I believe.
Oh, they respond back to us
Well,
within 5 days?
actually, we have to let them know, I think, within 5 days. I apologize. They have, I don't know if the letter states that they have an actual time limit, but that would be something that we would need to clarify with them, more or less.
Okay, so the one-time funds that folks know we have, right? And I know suggestion was to utilize those one-time funds to kind of extend our employees, giving them another year. And I know folks, fiscal folks don't like doing that. It's not recommended. And I know that probably those funds would not, are they counting on the unrestricted or restricted side?
The restricted money,
The one-time funds.
the one-time funds, they would, I believe, be restricted because they're not ongoing. They have an end date.
Okay. So this impact of resolutions that we are seeing before us today, is that what the county is reflecting to be the 90% of unrestricted funds now?
Yes, because the resolutions themselves helped to demonstrate through second interim that we could positively certify. Second interim had the multi-year projection with the assumptions that these positions would not be included in the budget
because of the fiscal stabilization plan. So with those actions, when the county and staff are recalculating the allocation of funds that are directed to salaries, that is where we reach the 90% without these positions.
Even though we rescinded 9.
Even though we've rescinded some due to situations where we're honoring an MOU. There are some staff that bumped into lower positions, and we are taking all of that into consideration.
Does the county know that there were changes to?
The county knows that we have had, that there has been bumping, and that we honored an MOU.
Okay. Just making sure.
Trustee Chris, did you have your hand?
No, I'm sorry.
Okay. Does anyone else have questions or comments? I do on this form also, or this resolution states that, where is it? That some employees did not request a hearing. Is that correct? Did not request a hearing and thereby waive the right to such hearing. Okay. Thank you. And these, just to be specific, these are classified staff. And can you just so that we're all clear, what positions exactly are those?
Good clarification question, thank you. So classified positions are the positions within the district that are not certificated, they don't hold the credential, and they're not unrepresented. They are positions, for example, as custodians. We have groundskeepers, we have a transport driver, and so on.
Okay, thank you for clarifying, because I tried to understand and it wasn't clear that, so this included our custodians, groundskeepers, paraprofessionals.
We did not lay off
No.
paraprofessionals this.
Okay, so then now I have a follow-up, if it's okay, on the groundskeepers. I really appreciated the public comment. It helped understand firsthand, right? You know, and they are valuable. And so this is why I asked Mr. Fine, like if we were to, you know, at this point, you know, if I were to ask my fellow colleagues to consider, you know, the 2 groundskeeper positions, because, you know, I think the information about how they were hired for Rancho Santana and the fact that yes, we do know that they did provide work of, you know, upkeep with the lawns that were done like that, you know, the equipment that they fix, you know, just thinking about cost savings, having them with us is a cost savings versus, you know, outsourcing and contracting and getting these things done, right? I mean, it is a cost savings. It's a question. Superintendent Sanchez.
Yes, can you rephrase what the question is?
When we have our groundskeepers, for example, and I'm not versed on all the different categories of custodian groundskeepers, but the way it was presented, these specific positions serve in a way for them to do in-house work, equipment, putting in lawns and the things that tree maintenance that they reference. It is a cost savings versus if we eliminate them and then we have to contract out in the future.
When employees are hired through the district, they fulfill the functions of either program needs, district needs, some of which could be, you know, as we heard today, tree maintenance, lawn renovation. All of that absolutely is valuable as all of the positions that we're considering. In the future, if we look at what the presenter, CEO of FICMAT stated, we could make amendments. The question as to whether or not we could deviate from the fiscal stabilization plan, I think was answered in the sense of this is the plan. This is how second interim was certified as positive. If we move forward with undoing one of the recommendations that are within these resolutions, we're back to where we started from. A lot of our positions do include cost savings to the district because it is most ideal when we can hire our own employees versus having contractors, and that's what we try to do. I would be very cautious to even move away from that practice, and I would say it's not a legal practice that we would now start to contract or anything like that, just to clarify, because those were positions and jobs held by employees.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. Then I would just say one more thing, and then I'll go to Trustee Grist, is that I urge our board then in the very near future that we have another discussion once the May revise comes in, once, like Mr. Fine says, we know the actual dollars coming in, that we look at all of the positions that are up for, that have been put for layoffs, and that we consider and prioritize the needs of our students in the district, and and that we do that together. And I'm going to say it again, that Mr. Fine is saying, once you have the dollars in hand and we do look at a revision, that we can do this by July. Trustee Grist?
This brings me up to, I don't know what the law is, but Erica, I would like you to find out how much can we charge to facility costs? To me, a groundskeeper is facilities. To me, a plumber is facilities. To me, someone who is doing electrical work for us is facilities. To me, someone who's doing HVAC is facilities. And why aren't we charging their salaries to facilities? Is there some legal reason that we can't do this? Because, I try to put everything into a box and put the right pieces in each box. And this is something that I even asked Diego, and I really never got an answer. Why is it that they are not put in the maintenance box, the facility box? Is there ed code that says you can't do that, or?
Very good question. So different funds are, I think that it's really important to not think of it as just a box, because different funds come into the district that don't necessarily fit into a box. There's funding that's reimbursement from the state if and when bonds are sold at the state level for projects that we've already completed, big projects. And I'm going to give an example. The Rancho Santana School, it cost $52 million. We are still waiting for any type of reimbursement for the construction of Rancho Santana School. Sometimes it takes years to even be considered. So when we talk about facilities money, there's different monies that have specifications tied to them. When we get reimbursements from the state for having built or constructed something, that money goes back into upkeeping the facility. So it's not necessarily money that we can tie to an employee or to fund an employee, because then we would not be meeting the guidelines of the reimbursement for that money. So it's not one general pot of money that is in a facilities box, so to speak.
Well, the reason I say this, though, is that we cannot keep our facilities in good shape unless we have these employees. That's where I get confused.
Certainly. Mhm.
Agreed. Trustee Martinez.
So I want to go back to what Gabriel, the Eagle Miss, also touched on, was the master agreement with the city, where they give us 300,000. From the point that I started being on the board, this contract with the city was very contentious and very depleting of the district back in the day. And just to be clear, years ago, different departments had their budgets, and the facilities and grounds department had a budget that they worked from year after year. And then all of a sudden, when we hit the recession, all of those things were taken away, even though they were extremely very efficient with their money. And that department did a lot of in-house stuff. They took care of their things. And so for me, this 300,000 proposal or funds that we get from the city, it's not earmarked. It's not set aside specifically for just fields or for our grounds. The conversation when this happened was that that was the intent. Okay? So if we're not doing that and we're not prioritizing how we're getting funding and what it's being utilized for, and if it was intended to bring in more grounds to help facilitate, we're taking on all the responsibility at every field. Okay? And every playground. They've given us money. They also committed to doing a field house in this agreement at Rancho. Didn't happen. So again, we're either going to hold folks accountable and we're going to measure how we take in money and we spend it where it's supposed to go. That's on us. But that's something we need to talk about moving forward, because we need to ensure that these maintenance of these fields are managed by the people that we need to hire to ensure that that happens.
Thank you, Trustee Martinez. And actually, I forgot to bring that up. So going to Mr. Fine's point of actual dollars being allocated, that is a perfect example of actual dollars, 300,000, supposed to be allocated for the purpose of maintaining, which is tied to positions. Hello. So why are we not doing that? That's a question for Superintendent Sanchez, and I see Trustee Marks has her hand too.
So go ahead, I suppose you should finish that, tie that up.
So the funds that are coming in from the master use agreement have been specifically identified at the time of the master agreement approval. I think that was 2017, that we did use money for materials to upkeep the fields. As Trustee Martinez has indicated, there are specific things in the master agreement that are yet to be fulfilled. I would have to look at what responsibility the district has, because we are in this agreement, the funds are coming in. And for example, the field house itself has not been built at Rancho. So there potentially could be items on both sides that have not been met, or maybe they have been met. I don't know. It is an agreement that is, over 7 years old, most likely. And it's one that we will have in the district, if I remember correctly. It's going on, into decades from now.
Yeah.
And just a point of reflection, Trustee Martinez has brought this up repeatedly. She even requested that at months ago, and we would have to check. My memory is not super good, but I do remember this was months ago that she requested a report and for someone to look into and meet with the city, as a matter of fact, to adjust it, revise it, and start those conversations. So I just want to make sure that we all remember that this is not a new conversation, and maybe it's a priority considering, that this impacts employees and our students.
Thank you for that reminder. Yes, we have talked about this, and this is an item that staff um, took very seriously, and staff did hold a meeting or more than a meeting with staff at the city in regards to this agreement. We are still in this agreement because it's one that we've signed. The items listed in the contract have not changed. We are still responsible for the maintenance of the fields and so on. I do not have the information right now in front of me in regards to the state of a field house being built and or, a breakdown as to what the funds are actually funding, other than I know materials.
So there was a meeting with the city recently,
Not recently, it was when we spoke about this.
months ago.
Yes, I believe it was November 2021.
Okay, Trustee Marks?
Go ahead.
Um, I keep hearing, and I just want for clarification too, we had to move the percentage of our total budget that we spend on salaries and benefits and that sort of thing in that bucket in the overall budget.
Yes.
And in order to do that, we picked together FTEs that would as evenly as possible distribute that reduction.
Yes.
This is the result of that. And although what I heard, which was encouraging from Mr. Fine, was once we've established our new budget, where we should have the conversations about our base program and what's important, and we have an opportunity, I guess what I'm trying to say right now is we have an opportunity to become better stewards of our fiduciary responsibilities moving forward. We can't stop what happened and what's happening because that's what we needed to do in order to get the qualified certification. And the fiscal stabilization plan was absolutely essential. And within that fiscal stabilization plan was the 3% reduction in people costs. So that's where we're at here. Not to make light of the fact that there are real people whom we care about at the end of this, but this is the thing we have to go through to get to the place where we could, once we know what we're dealing with and what our base program priorities are going to be, take a look at how, let's assume we have a bigger budget. So the 90% can include more people because there's more money. That's how I understand it. Am I off base there?
So that it goes along with what Mike Fine said, a future adjustment.
Right.
Based on what.
But after we
said
get
July.
the final
July.
numbers.
Mhm.
So yeah, early July is what I heard.
He said July. I don't
July.
know
We
if it
said
was-
July.
Yeah.
July 1 is when the budget.
Yeah.
But just
So that's, in that light, I feel like we really don't have any options for today to do more than to approve the resolutions as is.
thank you, Trustee Marks. I think just one point of clarification, though, in what you said, we initially together had looked at positions as a board for the initial cuts. The second round of cuts were not with our input. We received those documents that day, and I remember vividly because I was shocked to see that there were positions that we had not agreed on that were put on the resolution for that second round of cuts because, and I understand the budget at that point we were told was more severe and required those cuts. So they, they had to put those other positions on. So I just want to clarify that we were not a part of all of the recommended positions, only the initial.
My recollection was that we were given a menu, I guess, of
Yes.
possibilities the first time.
Mhm.
And we identified our optimal choices that day, but the menu
Right.
stayed the same. And so when the work was done, post approving the positions that we thought would meet the needs of that fiscal reduction, and it didn't because of the whole seniority and bumping and all of that, the positions that were presented to us in the second round were from the same menu.
Correct.
They just were not the ones we identified the first time. And it was as I recall, and you can clarify, it was done the way it was done because we were on time crunches. We had to meet the deadline for making that notification, correct?
Correct. So thank you for clarifying that. We did, and I know that this is, conversation that has happened before. It's conversation that we're almost just reviewing, potentially for the sake of reviewing. But we did have a menu of a menu of positions that was shared with the board. That those discussions took place, in a confidential manner. We also had very clearly identified positions on March 3rd, which, were the positions that the board considered for the first round of reductions. In January, as I presented to the board, I talked about potential rounds of reductions should it be needed. After the March 3rd resolutions that were adopted, as Trustee Marks indicated, when calculations were made, it was not going to be sufficient, as I had indicated to the board, to allow for second interim to be a positive certification. Therefore, we needed to have additional reductions moving forward, which came from the same menu of positions that we had already spoken of collectively as a whole. And that's how we get to, moving through the process, now looking at Resolution 12 for today. If there's not any further discussion, I would like for the board to consider approval of the reduction so that staff may work on what the next steps are in the process if needed.
I am continuing to get a phone call. Should we do that for public comment?
What would you all like to do?
Is that
It might be
legal to go back to a public comment?
I don't
after
know.
we have discussion?
They have a right to talk to us about a certain item on the agenda.
Yeah. So
has
in
to
that
be on
in
the
that
agenda.
in that light, I should answer the phone
Well,
call,
if
right?
it has to do with this agenda item,
Okay.
yes.
Okay. Hello? 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 Hi, are you calling to make a comment on our current agenda item? Okay, and I'm going to put you on speakerphone, and if you could give your name, and we'll give you 3 minutes to make your public comment. Hold on a second.
Okay,
Okay, go ahead. If you'll state your
My
name.
name is Kelly Barthoff, and I am a technology support specialist for the Hollister School District.
Okay, go
I'm
ahead.
on the list of people to be laid off in your current agenda item. But what brought me to this phone call was the fact that I listened to the gentleman from the Groundskeepers, and I noticed your response immediately when they mentioned how they do their own maintenance work and fix their own machines to keep the money in-house. And I just wanted to bring it to your attention that the technology staff that you are going to lay off has been working through the COVID 2 years. We do all the repairs in-house for every Chromebook that every student touches and uses daily for their curriculum. We prepare the keys, we repair the screens, we clean them, we replace motherboards. We replace the ribbons for the keyboard and the mouse and the touchpad. This goes on daily, multiple times. So just appreciating that maintenance makes their repairs, I thought you should be made aware that the technology department also repairs and replaces all the Chromebooks that all the students use every day.
Thank you. Thank you for making that point.
No problem.
Do you have any additional comments?
That'll be all. Thank you.
No, thank you. Bye.
Thank you for the public comment. Superintendent Sanchez is asking us to go ahead and take action on this resolution. So do we have a motion?
With a very heavy heart and with an understanding that I believe the state will do the right thing and that hopefully we will be rehiring these people sooner than later, to accept resolution, is it 6B?
6B. Oh.
Resolution 12, item 6B. And I know that I feel like I'm being used as a punching ball right now, because A, we know that the funds are there, but B, we can't use them because they're not there.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
We're like man in the middle here.
Person in the middle.
Person in the middle. Yes. Thank you. So I mean, we do have a fiduciary responsibility. I think this is just awful, but we have to do what we have to do. And we're in an untenable situation. So I would like to make a motion that we accept 6B, and what did you call it? Resolution, oh yeah, okay, that's what, resolution 12. Anything else, Erica?
2122.
2122.
Is there a second?
I will second.
Any discussion? I'm going to repeat and reiterate that I'd like for us to really look at the money we already are supposed to be getting from the city of Hollister, and that once we do know how much money we're getting from the state, that we look at all positions. Trustee Gris?
Yeah, and I really want to see that our district is really on top of it once the budget has been approved by the legislature and it's been signed by the governor, that we proactively contact these people and let them know that we have jobs. I want us to be proactive. I don't want it to be forced. I understand that maybe somebody might be on vacation or whatever, but we need to be proactive because they're part of our family, and I don't like this. It's just, you know, we need to do that for them. That's
Right.
just my 2 cents.
Agree.
Sorry.
There are steps, and I understand, Superintendent Sanchez explaining the process and steps, and I think obviously we have to follow them, but I would agree with Trustee Gris. Going to the person element of this, we could do more than just the steps and really engage. Thank you. Any other dialogue before we take the vote? Okay, all in favor?
I
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? 5-0. Moving on to item 6C.
Discussion and approval of the reduction or discontinuance of particular kinds of service. This is the process that will finalize the certificated layoff. If we look at the documents that are attached to this item, we have the response from the administrative law judge that heard the matter in regards to a certificated hearing on April 21st, 2022. The decision itself is number 2022-030999, and it represented 13 certificated employees as respondents. On behalf of the district, myself and HR director were witnesses. We had the opportunity to represent an evidence, and we had the opportunity to be cross-examined by legal counsel from the respondents. On behalf of the respondents, CTA presented their witness, which was Labor Rep Crystal Hall, who stated her opinions. As you can see in the brief response that the judge gave, the judge upheld the decision made by the district to move forward with these layoffs. Indicated in this response is that CTA did not provide any evidence to justify their opinion. We also have more details in regards to some of the individual employees that I won't go into publicly, but the board, it is a public document, it is posted on the agenda, in regards to what their viewpoints were on the matter. Are there any questions in regards to the administrative law judge's response to the district?
No.
Any questions from anyone? So I'm trying to understand, so this was only done for these positions, the administrative law judge, this whole process was only done for these that are laid out, not for the previous ones, right?
No, as you recall, I think that one of the clarifying questions, Board President, that you asked was if any of the staff chose to not engage in a hearing. So these 13 respondents did choose to have a hearing, and we followed the certificated hearing process.
I just to make sure. Thank you.
Okay, if there are no questions in regards to the administrative law judge's decision, the second piece to these documents include the resolution itself. Again, this is the final process of the certificated layoff hearing documentation, and this is resolution number 132122. It is a resolution to terminate the services of certificated employees as a result of reduction or discontinuation of particular kinds of services. This resolution itself makes reference to decisions made on March 3rd and 10th, and resolutions 5 and 8 regarding certificated staff. We have notified staff as the administrative law judge and met the March 15th timeline. The final timeline is correlated and tied to consideration for approval today in regards to this resolution. So the information is listed in regards to the different ed code, in regards to the specific employees that are in these positions. And at this time, I would like to ask for the approval of this resolution.
Does anyone have any questions or comments, or does anyone want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve resolution number 13/21/22 as presented.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Discussion? I would like to have discussion. These positions include, amongst most of them, include our PE teachers, our counselors, and our social workers, correct?
Yes.
And so, again, I'm going to state that I'm just so, and I know I understand, what Mr. Fine explained. I understand the county is holding our feet to the fire. I understand all of that, but I don't understand why we were not able to use more COVID money to potentially keep, especially, these positions that directly impact our kids. At our last board meeting, how many times did we hear social, emotional, and PE? PE's been brought up constantly. So when we talked about these budget cuts, I remember we as a governance team repeatedly said, we don't want the positions to impact students. We want positions that are going to have the least amount of impact. Well, I'm going to tell you, and I don't know about you all, but I've been getting a lot, almost daily communication from teachers, community, parents, and students. My kids play sports. I'm in the community, and students, kids from all the schools come up to me and say, Carla, is it true, blah, 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 that PE, is it true that, that this is happening, that so-and-so is not going to have a job? Kids know. So the fact that we didn't try to use COVID money to try to save some of these positions, the other impacts to middle school PE next year, which we asked several sessions ago, PE middle school is going to be okay, right? Yes, we were reassured. PE middle school is going to be fine. Well, guess what? It doesn't look like it. That is very disappointing. And so I think it's important for us to talk about it publicly, because what do we say? That we are here for the students. Well, let me tell you all, fellow colleagues, we are impacting them if we don't do anything. And I know that we have July and all of that, but I have to say this again. This is really worrisome. And the other piece, and then I'll go to Trustee Martinez, is that the board sets the direction, right? And we have repeatedly talked about school to prison pipeline, and we've talked about how we want to help our students and have them have art and PE and activities and all these things. Well, doing these budget cuts is not school to prison pipeline. So why are we kidding ourselves? We're going back. It's just so discouraging. Sorry, can't even speak. I'm so upset. Discouraging. Trustee Martinez.
Me, the part that we haven't also been updated on as to the ideas from what we're going to be spending from the LCAP. Some of these positions were in the LCAP purposely for supporting, supporting our students, our low-performing students, that PE teachers are being used for interventions to help, uplift those kids. We've been going to different schools. I mean, the objective was to look at what we were going to be able to bring back through the LCAP and sustain some of these people, or to keep them. We haven't gotten an update on that. So I don't know how we can move forward without really having resolution on the LCAP and what we can keep.
Trustee Grist?
Again, we're in this being pushed on all sides. And I think that one of the things that Trustee Martinez has been pushing, and that, we have to learn from this. And, where is the silver lining? And I think the monthly, having us get these monthly reports on the finances is essential. What Trustee Martinez is asking our business department to do, I wholly, 100% back her up. I think we need to have this, because then we're not here going, oh my gosh, what have we done? I mean, I just am sick about this. And that's not, if you're a person who has a pink slip today, you're like, well, booty boo, who cares? Doesn't affect you. Well, believe it or not, it does, because I truly care about you and the students, because we are here for the students and we are not fulfilling our job. But we need to learn from this, and I think that any ideas like what Trustee Martinez brought to the table, we need to start investigating and utilizing, so that we have a better handle on things. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Grist. And Trustee Toasty?
I agree with Jan. We need to learn from this and go forward. And I do also want to say that not only the certificated, but also the classified word directly affect our students. So I just wanted to add that.
Thank you, Trustee Toasty. Trustee Marks?
I know that for the outside looking in, it may feel as though I'm not caring about the humans that are at the end of these decisions. I just want to be clear. I just want to be clear that I have lost many nights of sleep throughout this entire process, and have had to do some bargaining with myself and my God as to what the right thing to do is. But bottom line, when we ran for these positions, we took on the responsibility to be the fiduciary people, the people that were fiduciaries for this district, and to keep this district running. And I don't think one of us is happy about the situation as it has unfolded. And COVID has only exacerbated this situation, and now this inflation that we're dealing with. But the bottom line is we have to do this. And I know I feel like I'm beating a dead horse, and I know we keep saying the same things, but the bottom line is we're here. We're here, we have to do it. Today's the hardest day. Not for, maybe for us, and the harder days are even coming for the people that are at the end of this, with the hope that we can do something, but we have to wait. And so I don't want anybody on the other end to think that I'm the meanie.
I 100% agree with you, Lisa. 100%.
I'm just sad about the whole thing. That's all. But it's necessary.
Thank you, Trustee Marks, for sharing that. I think it's important that the public does hear from each of us. And, I can speak, I think I can share with the public that I don't think none of us have been like, oh yeah, let's cut this. None of us are saying that. None of us. All of us have been very, this is a difficult decision, right? And we have to do it. The other thing that I do want to point out, because it's important, when we talk about retention and recruitment, And I've already had messages sent to me that we are losing staff. We are losing our bilingual social workers, counselors, potentially to other districts. It's already happening. I know that this is not in our hands again, but it's important that we know this, because when you lose, I told you all, us social workers, I mean, and this is not against Trustee Toasty, you're right. Every position here impacts a student. So I don't want to play, position against position. That's not what I'm saying. It's just, in these circumstances of COVID and with the impacts that are happening, the social emotional thing keeps bubbling up, right? And it is kind of like the flavor of the month, if you will. So we have to talk about it. And when you lose staff like this who are bilingual, from the community, culturally sensitive and responsive, we may not get them back, even in July when we hopefully get money. I'm just saying, it's a really harsh reality. And we just worked so hard to get those positions. And that was one thing for me personally as a board member, that I wanted to be able to leave and feel like, yes, we have staff that will be here forever. Wow. That's why for me, it's, I will join you all in this vote and support and do what we have to do. I really didn't want to do it because I feel like it's not even a real vote. I'm like, oh, so if I vote no, the county, right? We have no power in this. It's not even a real vote to me. But I'm here to support this effort, and let's move forward once we get our money. Call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, 5-0. Moving on to, I believe we have public comments for closed session.
There's nobody on the phone. Is there anybody in the audience? No.
Okay. Do we have a motion to convene the closed session?
So moved.
Second.
All, discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, let's go to closed session.